Some people enter your life like sunlight, warm, expected, easy to understand. Others enter like storms, sudden, powerful, impossible to ignore. But what happens when the person you should never love becomes the one your heart chooses? This is the story of Amina and Minjae, a story about the love that exists in the space between what we want and what we're allowed to have. Amina Makori had always prided herself on three things: her professionalism, her composure, and her ability to remain unshakable no matter the situation. At 31 years old, she'd built a solid reputation as one of East Africa's most sought-after interpreters. She spoke 5 languages fluently: English, Swahili, French, Mandarin, and Korean, and had worked at conferences across 3 continents. She'd stood in rooms where millions of dollars changed hands with a single handshake, where international policies were shaped with carefully chosen words. And through it all, she'd remained exactly what she needed to be: invisible, professional, detached. That was her job: to translate words without adding emotion, to be a conduit, not a participant. She was very good at it, until she met him. The International Tech Summit in Seoul was supposed to be just another assignment. 5 days of translating technical presentations about cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, topics she'd covered dozens of times before. Amina arrived at the Seoul Convention Center on a crisp October morning, her credentials around her neck, her tablet loaded with conference materials, her mind already shifting into professional mode. The venue was impressive, all glass and steel and modern architecture, filled with delegates from 40 countries, their conversations creating a multilingual hum that Amina found oddly comforting. She checked in at the interpreter booth, reviewed her schedule, and prepared for her first session. That's when she saw him. He was standing in the hallway between conference rooms, reading something on his phone with intense concentration. Tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair styled simply, wire-rimmed glasses, and a charcoal gray suit that looked expensive but understated. But it wasn't his appearance that caught Amina's attention. It was the way he moved. Purposeful, controlled, like someone who never wasted energy on unnecessary actions. He looked up from his phone and their eyes met across the crowded hallway. For a moment, neither looked away. Then he walked toward her. His bow was slight but respectful, traditional but not overly formal. "Excuse me," he said in Korean, his voice calm and steady, the kind of voice that could quiet a room without raising its volume. "Are you Amina Makori, the interpreter assigned to the cybersecurity track?" Amina switched to Korean smoothly. "Yes, I am. And you are?" "Kang Minjae. I'm presenting in session 3B this afternoon, Advanced Threat Detection in Financial Systems." He extended his hand. "I wanted to introduce myself beforehand. Some of the technical terminology can be specific." His handshake was firm but brief. Professional. "I appreciate that," Amina said. "I've reviewed your presentation materials. Your terminology is actually quite clear. You write well." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. "Thank you. That's something I don't hear often." He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her suddenly aware of his attention. "Your name, Amina Makori. That's Kenyan, yes?" "Yes." "It's beautiful. The name, I mean. It suits you." Amina felt something shift in the air between them. Something subtle but undeniable. This man is too smooth. Dangerously smooth, she thought. "That's very kind," she said, keeping her voice neutral, professional. "I should prepare for the morning sessions. I'll see you this afternoon, Mr. Gang." "Minjae, please, just Minjae. Then call me Amina." He smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I look forward to working with you, Amina." And then he was gone, walking down the hallway with that same purposeful stride, leaving Amina standing there, wondering why her heart was beating slightly faster than normal. Professional, she reminded herself. You're here to work, not to notice attractive men with calm voices and thoughtful eyes.
She took a breath, adjusted her credentials, and headed to the interpreter's booth, but she could still feel the warmth of his handshake on her palm. The morning sessions passed in a blur of technical jargon and simultaneous translation. Amina slipped into her professional mode easily, listening, processing, translating in real time, her mind moving between languages as smoothly as breathing. By lunch, she'd interpreted 4 presentations and 2 panel discussions. She was good at this. She knew she was good at this.
The afternoon session, Minjae's presentation, was in the main auditorium. Amina took her position in the interpretation booth, adjusted her microphone, and pulled up his slides on her monitor. Then he walked onto the stage. His presence was different here, more commanding, more confident. He moved to the podium without notes, without hesitation, and when he spoke, the audience leaned forward. His presentation was brilliant. Complex technical concepts explained with clarity and precision, real-world case studies that made abstract theories concrete, a dry subject made compelling through the sheer force of his expertise and delivery. And Amina translated every word, her voice matching his rhythm, his pauses, the subtle emphasis he placed on key points. It was like a dance, his words, her translation, the audience's understanding, all moving in perfect synchronization. When the presentation ended, the applause was enthusiastic. Minjae bowed slightly, answered a few questions with the same calm authority, and left the stage. Amina sat back in the booth, surprised to find herself slightly breathless. That was extraordinary, she thought. Not just his content, the way he presented it, the way he commanded that room. After the session ended, Amina was gathering her materials when someone knocked on the booth door. It was Minjae. "I wanted to thank you. Your interpretation was exceptional. You understood not just the words, but the intent behind them. That's rare." Amina felt warmth spread across her face, pride mixed with something else she didn't want to name. "That's my job," she said simply, "but thank you for noticing." "Would you have dinner with me?" The question came so naturally it took Amina a moment to process it. "To discuss translation challenges in technical fields. I'm genuinely curious about your process." It was a professional invitation, perfectly appropriate, completely innocent. So why did it feel like something more? Amina hesitated. "I should review materials for tomorrow's sessions." "Of course, I understand." Minjae's expression didn't change, but Amina thought she saw disappointment flicker across his face. "Perhaps another time." He turned to leave. "Wait," Amina heard herself say. "I do need to eat, and I am curious about your work. Dinner would be educational." The smile that spread across Minjae's face was worth the risk. "Educational," he repeated. "Yes, exactly that." They went to a small restaurant in Itaewon, the kind of place where Seoul's international community gathered, where conversations in 6 languages overlapped, where the food was authentic and unpretentious. Minjae ordered in Korean. Amina added her order without hesitation, her accent nearly perfect. "You speak Korean beautifully. How long did you study?" 4 years formally, then I lived in Busan for 6 months during a research fellowship. Immersion is the best teacher. "What were you researching?" Cross-cultural communication patterns in international business negotiations, how language shapes not just what we say, but how we think about agreements and relationships. Minjae leaned forward, genuinely interested. "And what did you find?" "That we're all trying to say the same things. Trust me, value me, work with me. But the cultural frameworks we use are so different that we often miss each other completely." Amina smiled. "That's why people like me exist, to bridge those gaps." "You're not just a translator, you're a cultural mediator." Exactly. Amina felt something warm bloom in her chest at being understood so quickly. Most people don't get that distinction. The conversation flowed naturally from there. They talked about language, about technology, about the challenge of making complex ideas accessible. Minjae told her about his work in cybersecurity, not the classified details, but the philosophy behind it, the cat and mouse game between security and threat, order and chaos. "I like puzzles,"
Systems that need to be understood, vulnerabilities that need to be found before the wrong people find them. There's something satisfying about protecting things that most people never even know are under attack. You're a guardian, Amina said, standing watch over systems people take for granted. I never thought of it that way, but yes, I suppose I am. It sounds lonely, Amina observed, guarding things in silence. Minjae's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his usually controlled features. It is, he admitted quietly, very lonely. The food arrived, breaking the intensity of the moment. They ate, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. Favorite cities, worst travel experiences, the quirks of conference culture. Amina found herself laughing more than she had in months. Minjae had a dry wit that caught her off guard, observations that were sharp but never cruel, stories that revealed a man who saw the world with both precision and compassion. When dinner ended and they walked back into the Seoul night, the city glowing with neon and possibility, Amina realized she didn't want the evening to end. Thank you for dinner and for the conversation. It was more than educational. For me too, Minjae paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Amina, I know we just met, and I know this is a professional context, but I feel like I should tell you something. Her heart rate picked up. What? You're different from anyone I've met. The words were simple, but the way he said them, with that calm voice now carrying weight and intention, made them feel significant. Different how? Amina asked, keeping her tone light even as her pulse raced. Minjae stepped closer, not inappropriately close, but close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes behind his glasses. You make even chaos feel peaceful. In that booth today, translating my presentation, it felt like you were inside my mind, understanding not just what I was saying, but what I meant to say. And just now at dinner, I don't usually talk this much about real things, but with you, it feels easy. Amina's breath caught. Every professional instinct screamed at her to step back, to deflect, to maintain boundaries. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "It feels easy for me too." They stood there on the Seoul sidewalk, the city moving around them, both acutely aware of the line they were approaching. I should go, Amina said finally. Early session tomorrow. Of course. Minjae stepped back, giving her space. Good night, Amina. Good night, Minjae. She walked toward the subway, forcing herself not to look back, but she could feel his gaze following her until she disappeared into the station. That night, in her hotel room, Amina lay awake staring at the ceiling. This is a mistake, she told herself. You're here for 5 days. He's a client, technically. You're a professional. This isn't what you do. But her heart wasn't listening to logic. Her heart remembered the way he said her name, the way he listened like her words mattered, the way he'd seen past her professional mask to something deeper, something real. You make even chaos feel peaceful. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Amina rolled over, pulling the hotel pillow close, and tried not to think about amber-flecked eyes and the voice calm enough to quiet storms. She failed completely. The next morning brought unexpected chaos. A major cyber attack hit several conference sponsors simultaneously, coordinated, sophisticated, designed to cause maximum disruption. The conference organizers went into crisis mode, pulling together an emergency incident response team. Amina was in the interpretation booth when the announcement came through. All scheduled sessions canceled, emergency meetings convened, specialized personnel required immediately. Her phone buzzed with a message from the conference coordinator. Need you for incident team. Report to strategy room 5. Urgent. She grabbed her tablet and headed to the 5th floor, her mind already shifting into crisis mode. This was the kind of high-stakes situation where clear communication could mean the difference between containment and catastrophe. She pushed open the door to strategy room 5, and there was Minjae, standing at a whiteboard covered in diagrams and code, already deep in analysis with 3 other cybersecurity specialists. His eyes met hers across the room. Amina, he said, And despite the crisis, despite the chaos, his voice carried that same calm authority. Thank God, we need real-time translation between the Korean incident response team and the international security coordinators. Are you cleared for sensitive communications? Yes, Amina said, moving into professional mode instantly. What level? Level 3 confidential. Nothing classified but sensitive corporate data and security protocols. I'm cleared for level 3. What do you need? Everything, Minjae said simply. We're going to be translating attack patterns, response strategies, technical vulnerabilities. Fast, accurate, no margin for error. And so it began. 14 hours straight. Amina translating between Korean security teams and international coordinators, her mind processing technical jargon in 3 languages simultaneously. Minjae running analysis, coordinating responses, his calm presence the anchor point in a room full of stress and urgency. They worked side by side, their communication becoming almost telepathic. He'd start a sentence, she'd finish translating before he completed it. She'd catch a nuance in a Korean briefing, he'd immediately understand its significance. Around hour 10, someone brought in food. Amina and Minjae ate standing up, still working, sharing a single laptop screen. You're incredible at this, Minjae said quietly between crisis calls. The way you process information this fast, this accurately, it's like your brain works in parallel universes. So does yours, Amina countered. The way you're tracking 6 different attack vectors simultaneously while coordinating 4 teams, that's not normal human cognitive function. He smiled, tired but genuine. Maybe we're both slightly abnormal. Maybe that's why this works. Their eyes met, and for just a moment, the chaos faded, and there was only the 2 of them, standing shoulder to shoulder, fighting the same fight. Then another alert came through, and they were back to work. Finally, around 2 a.m., the crisis stabilized. The attacks were contained, systems secured, protocols updated. The emergency team started to disperse, exhausted but victorious. Minjae and Amina were the last to leave the strategy room. They walked out into the empty conference center, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul glowed in the distance, a city that never truly slept, just like them. We make a good team, Minjae said, his voice rough with exhaustion. We do, Amina agreed. He turned to face her. Amina, I know this isn't the time or place, but I need to say this while I still have the courage. Today, working with you, not just your skill, but the way you think, the way you stay calm under pressure, the way you... He paused, searching for words. You're extraordinary, and I don't just mean professionally. Amina's heart hammered against her ribs. Every logical part of her brain screamed warnings. Too fast, too complicated, too risky. But another part, the part that had been coming alive since she met him, whispered, what if? Minjae, she said softly, I feel it too, this connection. But we barely know each other. We're in the middle of a conference. I leave in 3 days. You have your life here. I have mine in Nairobi. This is impossible, he finished. I know. Believe me, I know. My life is complicated. My work is complicated. Getting involved with someone right now, especially someone who lives on another continent, it doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't make sense at all. They stood there, both acknowledging the impossibility of what was happening between them. But I can't stop thinking about you, Minjae admitted. From the moment we met in that hallway, you've been in my thoughts. When I should be focused on security protocols, I'm wondering what you're translating. When I should be sleeping, I'm replaying our conversations. This isn't logical, but it's real. Amina felt tears prick at her eyes. Not sad tears, but tears of recognition, of being seen, of feeling something she'd convinced herself she was too busy, too focused, too professional to feel. I can't stop thinking about you either, she whispered. They stood there in that empty conference center, soul glowing beyond the windows, both of them suspended between logic and longing. 3 more days, Minjae said. The conference ends in 3 days. Then you go back to Nairobi and I stay here. But would you let me have these 3 days to explore whatever this is? No promises, no expectations, just 3 days of honesty. Amina knew she should say no, should protect her heart, should maintain professional boundaries. Instead, she said, yes. The smile that spread across Minjae's exhausted face made every risk worth it. Yes, Amina said again, more certain this time. 3 days. Let's see what happens. He reached out and took her hand, just her hand, nothing more. And they stood there in the empty conference center, soul glowing beyond the windows, both of them suspended between logic and longing. But sometimes the heart knows things logic can't understand. Sometimes you meet someone and realize that 3 days of truth is worth more than a lifetime of safety. Sometimes you have to choose the storm over the sunlight, even knowing it might destroy you. Especially knowing it might destroy you.
The next 48 hours felt like living in a dream Amina wasn't sure she wanted to wake from. During the day, she translated conference sessions with her usual precision and professionalism. But between sessions, during breaks, in the moments when the world wasn't watching, she and Minjae found each other. Coffee between morning presentations where they'd sit in the corner of the conference cafe and talk about everything except the fact that their time together had an expiration date. Lunch stolen between crisis management meetings, where Minjae would make her laugh with observations about conference culture, and she'd counter with stories from her most absurd interpretation assignments. Late evenings after the sessions ended, walking through Seoul's glowing streets, neither of them wanting to say goodnight, both of them acutely aware that every moment was borrowed time. On the second evening, Minjae took her to Namsan Tower. They rode the cable car up the mountain as the sun set, Seoul spreading out below them in a tapestry of lights and life. At the top, surrounded by the famous love locks that couples left as promises, they stood at the railing and looked out at the city. I used to come here when I first moved to Seoul, when the job got too intense, when the loneliness got too heavy. I'd come up here and remind myself why I chose this life. The city is beautiful from up here. Manageable. You can see the patterns, the way everything connects. And now? Amina asked. Why did you bring me here? He turned to face her. Because I wanted to share something that matters to me. And because up here with you, the loneliness I've been carrying for years, it's gone. Just gone. The vulnerability in his voice broke something open in Amina's chest. I'm leaving tomorrow, she said, the words cutting like glass. One more day, Minjae. Then I go back to my life, and you go back to yours. I know. And we can't, there's no future here. You know that, right? I know. He reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather-light. But right now, standing here with you, I don't care about tomorrow. I just care about this moment. Is that foolish? Completely foolish, and exactly how I feel too. They kissed then, with Seoul glowing below them and the night wrapping around them like a secret. It was gentle and desperate all at once, a kiss that held all the words they couldn't say, all the tomorrows they wouldn't have. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Minjae rested his forehead against hers. I wasn't looking for this. For you. I'd convinced myself I was fine alone, that my work was enough, that connections were a liability I couldn't afford. What changed? Amina asked. You walked into that hallway, and suddenly nothing else made any sense anymore. Amina felt tears slip down her face. I don't know how to do this, how to walk away tomorrow knowing what this feels like. Maybe we don't have to figure it out tonight. Maybe we just be here, together, for as long as we have. So they stayed on that tower, wrapped in each other's presence, stealing time from a universe that had already decided they couldn't keep it. But the universe was about to make that decision very clear. The next morning, Amina's colleague, a fellow interpreter named Sarah who had been working the conference with her, pulled her aside during a coffee break. Amina,
We need to talk, Sarah said, her expression worried. About Kang Minjae. Amina's stomach tightened. What about him? Sarah glanced around, making sure no one was listening, then lowered her voice. Do you know what he really does, beyond the cybersecurity consulting? I know he works in threat detection and system security. He works with the National Intelligence Service, off-record operations, government contracts that don't officially exist. He's not just a consultant, Amina. He's part of something much bigger and much more dangerous. Amina felt a ground shift beneath her. How do you know this? My husband works in government liaison. He recognized Minjae's name when I mentioned I was working with him. Amina, people like Minjae, they can't have normal relationships. Everything in their life is scrutinized, monitored, controlled. He might care about you, but his world won't let him keep you. Amina. Sarah, I'm not trying to hurt you, Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm. I'm trying to protect you. Whatever's happening between you, and don't think I haven't noticed, it has to end, because he's not free to choose you even if he wants to. And if you get more involved, you'll become a target, a vulnerability. Do you understand what I'm saying? Amina's heart hammered in her chest. No, it's just rumors, office gossip. It's not. Sarah gripped Amina's arm. I love you like a sister, so please hear me. Be careful with Kang Minjae. He lives in a world that doesn't allow for love, for connections, for anything that could be used as leverage against him. Protect your heart, because he won't be allowed to keep you in his life, no matter how much he might want to. The words haunted Amina through the rest of the morning. She tried to focus on her translations, on the technical presentations and panel discussions, but Sarah's warning kept echoing in her mind. He's not free to choose you. You'll become a target. His world won't let him keep you. During lunch break, Amina sat alone in the empty interpretation booth, staring at her phone, at the messages she and Minjae had exchanged over the past 3 days. Funny observations, gentle flirtations, moments of connection that felt precious and real. Was it all real? Or had she been naive, reading depth into something that couldn't exist outside this conference bubble? Her phone buzzed. A message from Minjae. Meet me on the rooftop garden after the afternoon session. I need to see you. Amina stared at the message for a long time before typing, okay. The rooftop garden was where they'd been taking their breaks, a quiet space with potted trees and wooden benches, a small oasis above the concrete and glass of the conference center. Minjae was already there when Amina arrived, standing at the railing, his posture tense. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and she saw immediately that something had changed. The warmth in his eyes was still there, but it was shadowed by something else. Resignation, maybe, or fear. Minjae, Amina started. I need to ask you something. I know what you're going to ask. And yes, it's true. Amina's breath caught. What's true? My work, the rumors you've heard. I'm not just a cybersecurity consultant. I work with government security operations, things I can't talk about, things that make my life complicated. Why didn't you tell me? Because for 3 days, I wanted to be just Minjae, not an operative, not a government asset, not someone whose relationships are security risks. I wanted to be a man who met an extraordinary woman and got to know her without all the complications of my real life. Amina's eyes filled with tears. But those complications still exist. Yes, Minjae's voice broke slightly. They do. They stood there in silence, the truth settling between them like winter frost. Finally, Amina spoke, her voice shaking. So, what now? Was this all just a fantasy? 3 days of pretending? No. Minjae stepped towards her, his hands gripping the railing like he needed something solid to hold on to. Every word I said was real. Every feeling was real. You're the most genuine thing that's happened to me in years. But Amina, he paused, pain written across his face. I shouldn't have let this go as far as it did. Why are you pushing me away? Because I'm trying to protect you. His voice rose, then immediately dropped again, controlled. My world isn't safe. The people I work with, the operations I'm involved with, they're dangerous. And anyone close to me becomes a target, a vulnerability. I knew that. I've always known that. But I let myself forget for 3 days. I let myself believe. He stopped, shaking his head. Believe what? Amina pressed. That maybe I could have this, have you. That maybe I could be selfish enough to keep you in my life, even knowing the risks. Tears streamed down Amina's face now. Let me decide what risks I'm willing to take. I can't. Minjae's voice was barely above a whisper. Amina, is something happened to you because of me, because of my work, because someone saw you as a way to get to me? I couldn't live with that. Do you understand? I couldn't survive knowing I put you in danger. So you're making this decision for both of us? I'm making the only decision I can, the one that keeps you safe. Even if it breaks both our hearts? Minjae closed his eyes, and Amina saw a tear slip down his cheek. Yes, especially then.
Amina wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to tell him that love was worth the risk, that they could figure it out, that 3 days wasn't enough. But looking at his face, at the pain there, at the certainty beneath the pain, she realized he'd already made his choice. Did you ever plan to tell me about your work, about the impossibility of us? I don't know, Minjae admitted. Part of me hoped the conference would end, you'd go home, and we'd both move on, that it would just fade. But I knew it wouldn't. Not for me. Not for me either. They stood facing each other, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the rooftop garden, both of them caught in the terrible space between love and impossibility. I'm sorry, Minjae said, for letting myself get close to you, for making you feel things I can't honor, for being selfish enough to want 3 days even knowing they'd end like this. I'm not sorry, Amina said, her voice fierce despite her tears. These 3 days showed me what it feels like to connect with someone so deeply, to be seen and understood, to matter. Don't you dare apologize for giving me that. Amina, no. She stepped back, needing distance. If this is ending, if you've decided that protecting me means pushing me away, then do it. But don't apologize for the best 3 days I've had in years. Minjae looked like she'd struck him. His composure finally cracked completely, his face contorting with suppressed emotion. You have no idea how much I wish I could be different, how much I wish my life allowed for this, for you. But it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Amina nodded slowly, acceptance and heartbreak warring in her chest. Then I guess this is goodbye. She turned to walk away, needed to walk away before she completely fell apart. Amina. She stopped but didn't turn around. You asked me what changed, why I let myself get close to you despite knowing better. What changed? Her voice was barely audible. I realized that some things are worth the pain of losing them. Meeting you, knowing you, even just for 3 days, it was worth all of this. Worth the hurt, worth the impossibility. You were worth it. Amina pressed her mouth to her, trying to hold back a sob. Goodbye, Minjae. This time, she walked away, and he let her go. The final day of the conference passed in a blur of professional obligation and emotional numbness. Amina translated sessions mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She didn't see Minjae. He'd apparently left the conference early, cited emergency work, gone back to whatever shadowy operations filled his real life. Sarah stayed close, offering silent support, never saying I told you so, just being there. When the clothing ceremony ended and delegates began dispersing, heading to airports and train stations, Amina packed up her materials with steady hands and a hollow chest. She was walking toward the conference exit when someone handed her an envelope. This was left at the front desk for you, the staff member said. Amina's name was written on the front in Minjae's handwriting, neat, precise, controlled even in this. She found a quiet corner and opened it.
Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Amina, I'm leaving the city for a while. There are things I can't say, operations I can't discuss, places I'll be that I can't name. But you deserve truth, even if I can't give you everything. The night we solved the crisis together, that 14-hour marathon of chaos and coordination, I realized something I've been trying not to admit. You're not just someone I met at a conference. You're not just someone who made 3 days less lonely. You're the first person I've cared about in years. The first person who made me want to be more than my work, more than my duty, more than the controlled, careful operative I've become. You're the first person I wanted to protect, not because it was my job, but because the thought of anything happening to you felt like dying. I don't know if we'll meet again. My life doesn't make promises. But if we do, if somehow, someday our paths cross again, I pray I'll be someone worthy of you, someone who can offer you more than 3 days and an impossible goodbye. The USB contains something I've never shared with anyone. My music, songs I've written over the years, melodies born from loneliness, from longing, from the silence I've carried. I want you to have them, to know that part of me exists beyond the operative, the guardian, the controlled mask. I'm sorry for what I can't give you, but I'm not sorry for knowing you. Thank you for 3 days of being seen. Minjae. P.S. If you ever need me, for anything, any reason, send a message with a crescent moon emoji. I'll find a way to reach you. Not a promise of forever, just a promise that I'm here, watching, caring, even from a distance. Amina read the letter 3 times, tears falling onto the paper, smudging the ink slightly. Then she carefully folded it and placed it back in the envelope, with the USB drive. She walked out of the Seoul Convention Center into the October afternoon, hailed a taxi to the airport, and didn't look back. On the plane back to Nairobi, she finally allowed herself to fall apart, quietly, in her window seat, watching Korea disappear beneath the clouds. Some loves don't end with closure, she realized. They end with doors left slightly open, with promises made in crescent moons and USB drives full of unshared music. They end with a terrible hope that maybe, someday, impossible might become possible. That was somehow worse and better than a clean goodbye. 2 months later, Emil was back in Nairobi, deep into work on a new United Nations assignment. Life had returned to its familiar rhythm. Wake up, work, translate, sleep. Professional, controlled, unshakable. Except she was shaken. Late at night, alone in her apartment, she'd play Minjae's music. Haunting melodies played on piano and guitar. No lyrics, just pure emotion translated into sound. She'd listen and remember Seoul. Remember 3 days that felt like a lifetime. Remember amber-flecked eyes and a voice that could quiet storms. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, her phone would buzz late at night. An unknown Korean number. No words, just one emoji. A crescent moon. Their secret language. His way of saying, I'm still here. I'm still thinking of you. I'm still in this impossible space between duty and desire. And every time, without fail, Amina would respond. A star. Hope. Because some loves don't end. They don't fade. They don't follow logic or geography or reason. They simply wait. In crescent moons and late-night messages. In USB drives full of music. In the space between what we want and what we're allowed to have. And maybe, just maybe, that waiting is its own kind of love. The kind that doesn't demand, doesn't cling, doesn't insist on happy endings. It just exists. Quiet, patient, impossible. And somehow, in its impossibility, more real than anything else. 6 months passed in that strange pattern of absence and presence. Amina built her career, took on more high-profile assignments, traveled to Geneva, Brussels, New York. Her reputation grew. The interpreter who never missed a nuance, never lost composure, never let personal feelings interfere with professional excellence. Everyone says she was at the top of her game. Only Sarah knew the truth, that Amina carried Seoul in her heart like a wound that wouldn't quite heal. And every few weeks, like clockwork, the messages came. A crescent moon. Always late at night, always from different numbers. He must have been moving, changing locations, maintaining operational security, even in something as small as an emoji. And always, Amina responded, a star. Their entire relationship reduced to two symbols, a moon and a star, longing compressed into pixels. Sarah asked her once, "Why do you keep responding? Why torture yourself?" Amina had no good answer. Because he's still out there, still thinking of me. And I can't just let that go. Can you move on like this with him haunting you from a distance? I don't know, Amina admitted, but I'm not ready to stop hoping, not yet. Then one ordinary Wednesday in April, everything changed. Amina was in her office preparing for an upcoming African Union summit when her phone rang. Unknown number, Korean country code. She almost didn't answer. Probably spam, wrong number, robocall. But something made her pick up. Hello? Silence. Then, Amina. Her breath stopped. That voice. That calm, steady voice that haunted her dreams. Minjae? I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't call. I know we agreed. Where are you? Amina's voice shook. Are you okay? I'm in Nairobi. The world tilted sideways. What? I'm in Nairobi, just for today. I have a layover, 18 hours, before I fly to the next operation. I know it's insane. I know I have no right to ask. But could I see you? Amina's heart hammered so hard she thought it might escape her chest. When? Where? There's a cafe in Karen, Talisman. I'm there now. But Amina, if this is too much, if you've moved on, if you need me to stay away, I'll be there in 30 minutes. She hung up, grabbed her keys, and drove across Nairobi like her life depended on it. Talisman was one of Nairobi's iconic spots, a beautiful garden cafe where expats and locals mingled, where conversations in a dozen languages overlapped, where the smell of coffee mixed with jasmine and bougainvillea. Amina saw him immediately. He was sitting at a corner table in the garden section, wearing civilian clothes, jeans, a simple shirt, no glasses today, looking simultaneously exactly the same and completely different. Thinner, maybe, more shadows under his eyes, the weight of whatever he'd been doing for the past 6 months visible in the set of his shoulders. But when he saw her, his face transformed with that same smile she remembered from Seoul. He stood as she approached. "Hi," he said, and his voice carried 6 months of longing compressed into one word. "Hi," Amina whispered. They stood there, 3 feet apart, both afraid to close the distance, both drowning in everything unsaid. Finally, Minjae gestured to the chair across from him. "Will you sit, please?" Amina sat. He sat. They stared at each other across a cafe table in Nairobi, the impossibility of the moment hitting them both. "I can't believe you're here," Amina said. "I can't believe I'm here either. When I saw the layover location in my briefing, I almost..." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncertainty she'd never seen from composed Minjae. "I almost didn't call, almost convinced myself to stay at the airport. But I've been carrying you with me for 6 months, Amina, and 18 hours in your city without seeing you? I couldn't do it. What have you been doing? Where have you been?" "I can't tell you specifics. Operations in Southeast Asia, some work in Eastern Europe, threat assessment in places that don't officially exist on any map." He paused. "Lonely places, dangerous places, places where I kept thinking, what the hell am I doing with my life?" "Did you find an answer?" Minjae's laugh was hollow. "No, just more questions. More loneliness, more wondering what you're doing, whether you're happy, whether you hate me for pushing you away. I don't hate you, Amina said softly. I never hated you. I was angry, hurt, confused, but never hate. Has there been anyone else? The vulnerability in his question broke her heart. No, Amina admitted. I've tried, gone on dates, let friends set me up, but everyone felt like a shadow compared to this, whatever this is. Relief flooded Minjae's face. Me too. There was someone my family tried to arrange, a proper match, someone who fit their expectations. I met her 3 times, called it off because she wasn't you. They ordered coffee neither of them would drink and talked for hours. Minjae told her what he could about his work, the puzzle of cybersecurity writ large across nations, the cat-and-mouse game played out in code and strategy, the strange satisfaction of protecting systems most people would never know were under attack. Amina told her about her work, new assignments, languages added, the strange life of someone who lived between cultures, always translating, never quite settled anywhere. I listened to your music, Amina said, on the USB drive, every night for the first 2 months. It's beautiful, Minjae. Heartbreaking. And beautiful. I wrote more, he admitted. After Seoul, after losing you. The only way I could process it was through music. Can I hear it someday? You're hearing it now. Every time I send that moon emoji, that's me playing those songs and thinking of you. Every single time. Tears slipped down Amina's face. Why are we doing this to ourselves? Why are we holding on to something we can't have? Because letting go feels like dying, and I'm not ready to die yet. Are you? No, Amina whispered. No, I'm not. They left the cafe and walked through Karen, the green, beautiful suburb where Nairobi felt almost European, where colonial-era houses stood under flame trees, where the air smelled of rain and possibilities. This is where Karen Bleaken lived, Amina said, pointing to a museum in the distance. Out of Africa, another impossible love story. Do all the best love stories have to be impossible? Minjae asked. Maybe that's what makes them memorable. Easy love doesn't teach us anything, doesn't change us, doesn't make us braver or stronger or more human. I don't want to be braver or stronger. I just want to keep you. They found a quiet spot under a jacaranda tree, the kind of perfect secret place cities keep hidden for people who need them. Minjae turned to face Amina, taking both of her hands in his. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting, because if you interrupt, I'll lose my courage. Amina nodded, her heart racing. I've been spending 6 months telling myself that pushing you away was noble, that I was protecting you, that love wasn't worth the risk to your safety. But the truth is, he paused, gathering himself. The truth is, I was a coward. I was afraid, not of my work putting you in danger, though that's real. I was afraid of how much I feel for you, how deeply you got inside me in just 3 days, how completely you've lived in my heart since then. Tears streamed down Amina's face as he continued. I don't have a solution. I can't promise you a normal life, a safe life, a life where my work doesn't cast shadows. I can't promise geographic stability or constant presence, or any of the things you deserve. But I can promise you truth. I can't promise you that you're the most important person in my world. And I can't promise you that if you'll let me, if you'll risk this with me, I will fight to make this work. Not perfectly, not easily, but real. Amina, he whispered, say something, please. I'm in love with you, Amina said, her voice shaking with emotion. I have been since Seoul, since Namsan Tower, since you showed me your music and told me about loneliness. And I don't care if it's complicated. I don't care if we have to figure it out across continents and time zones and operational security. I want to try. I want to fight for this. Even knowing how hard it will be? Especially knowing how hard it will be. Because you're worth fighting for. They kissed under that jacaranda tree in Karen, Nairobi, 6 months after Seoul, and it felt like coming home and launching into space simultaneously. When they finally pulled apart, both laughing and crying, Minjae said, "I have 12 more hours before I have to be at the airport." "Then we have 12 hours," Amina said. "Let's not waste them." They spent those 12 hours like people do when time is precious, intensely, presently, soaking up every moment. They drove to the giraffe center and fed giraffes together, laughing as the animals bent their long necks down for treats. They had lunch at a tiny Ethiopian restaurant, where Amina taught Minjae how to eat with injera properly, and he made her laugh with his terrible attempts at rolling the sourdough bread. They walked through Karuta Forest, talking about everything: childhoods, dreams, fears, the shape they wanted their impossible relationship to take. "I can't tell you where I am most of the time, or what I'm doing, but I can check in, send messages when I can, video calls when security allows. I travel constantly for work, sometimes with a week's notice, but I can share my schedule when possible, meet you in overlapping cities." "This is insane," Minjae said. "We're planning a relationship with more logistics than most military operations." "We're both insane," Amina agreed. "But maybe that's what it takes." Too soon, always too soon, they were standing in the departures area of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Minjae's flight boarded in an hour. This time, they both knew it wasn't goodbye forever, but it was still goodbye for now. And now could mean weeks or months. "I'll send the moon," Minjae promised. "I'll send the star," Amina replied. "And when our schedules align, we'll meet, somewhere in the world." "Anywhere in the world," Minjae corrected. "I'll find you, Amina. No matter where we both end up, I'll find you." He kissed her one more time, deep and desperate and full of promise. Then he walked through security, turning back 3 times to look at her, until finally he disappeared into the crowds of travelers. Amina stood there long after he was gone, her heart full and broken and hopeful all at once. That night, alone in her apartment, Amina's phone buzzed. A message from Minjae's personal number, the real one, not the rotating unknown numbers he used for emoji messages. A photo, the view from his airplane window, clouds lit by sunset, golden and infinite. And below it, "Carrying you with me, always. Crescent moon." Amina smiled through her tears and replied, "Right there beside you, star." The months that followed weren't easy. They were hard in ways Amina had never experienced. Waiting for messages that came at unpredictable times, planning video calls around time zones and operational security, learning to trust when she couldn't see or hear or touch. But they were also beautiful, because Minjae kept his promise. He sent the moon whenever he could. He called when security allowed, sometimes just for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Once for 3 hours straight when he was on a secure line and they talked until dawn. And twice, their schedules aligned. Once in Istanbul, where they had 48 hours between his operation ending and her conference beginning. They explored the city like teenagers on their first date, got lost in the Grand Bazaar, kissed on the Galata Bridge at sunset. Once in Singapore, where Amina was translating for an ASEAN summit and Minjae was doing security consulting in the same hotel. They couldn't be seen together. His operational security was strict, so they met on a rooftop garden at midnight, stole 3 hours under the stars, and parted like ghosts. It wasn't normal. It wasn't easy. It wasn't what either of them would have chosen if they could write their own story. But it was theirs. And in the spaces between seeing each other, they built something real through screens and messages and trust, learning each other's rhythms, sharing small daily victories and frustrations, being present even when physically absent. Amina learned to recognize the tone of Minjae's texts, when he was exhausted, when operations were weighing on him, when she needed her to talk about anything except his work, when she needed her to just listen in silence. Minjae learned Amina's patterns, when big assignments stressed her out, when she needed encouragement, when she needed space to process, when she needed him to make her laugh with his dry observations about international conferences. They became experts in long-distance love, the kind that exists in pixels and time zones and stolen moments. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. Not perfectly, not easily, but real. 1 year after that day in Nairobi, Amina was in her apartment when her phone rang. Minjae's number. A scheduled call. They'd planned this one days ago. "Hi," she answered, smiling before he even spoke. "Hi yourself," Minjae said, and she could hear the smile in his voice too. "I have news." "Good news or bad news?" "Good news. Great news, actually." He paused. "I'm done." Amina's heart stopped. "Done with what?" "The operations, the government contracts, the off-record work. I submitted my resignation 3 months ago. There's a transition period, security protocols, all kinds of bureaucracy. But it's approved. I'm out, Amina. Really out." "Minjae," Amina couldn't find words.
I've been offered a position at a private cybersecurity firm, based in Singapore but mostly remote work. No classified operations, no government strings. I can travel freely, live where I want, be with who I want without security concerns. When? Next month. I'll have to spend a few weeks in Singapore for onboarding. But after that, he paused. After that, I want to come to Nairobi. Not for 18 hours, not stolen between operations, but to stay, to build something real with you. If you'll have me. Amina was crying now, happy tears, disbelieving tears. "If I'll have you, Minjae, I've been waiting for this. For you, for us to have a chance at something more than crescent moons and video calls. I know it's been hard. I know I asked you to wait for something that seemed impossible." "You were worth waiting for," Amina interrupted. "You've always been worth it." "Then say yes. Say yes to me coming to Nairobi. Say yes to trying this, us, without all the complications. Say yes to possibility." "Yes," Amina said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." 6 weeks later, Amina stood in Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, where she'd said goodbye to Minjae a year ago. But this time, she wasn't saying goodbye. This time, she was saying hello to forever. When Minjae walked through those sliding glass doors, pulling a suitcase that held his entire life, his eyes found hers immediately. He dropped the suitcase. She ran across the arrivals hall. They collided in an embrace that felt like every romantic movie ending, and nothing like the movies at all. More real, more imperfect, more absolutely right. "You're here," Amina whispered against his chest. "You're really here." "I'm here," Minjae confirmed, "and I'm not leaving. Not unless you come with me." They pulled apart just enough to look at each other. Really look, without screens, without distance, without time limits. "I can't believe this is real," Amina said. "Believe it." Minjae cupped her face in his hands. "Because I'm done with impossible. I'm done with distance. I'm done with everything except being with you." He kissed her there in the arrivals hall, surrounded by travelers and reunions and the beautiful chaos of people finding each other. And it felt like coming home, not to a place, to a person. Some love stories begin with sunlight, easy, expected, simple. Some begin with storms, dramatic, intense, overwhelming. But the best love stories, they begin with both. With the storm that teaches you what you're capable of weathering, with the sunlight that reminds you why you fought through the darkness. Amina and Minjae's love wasn't easy. It wasn't simple. It wasn't what either of them expected when they met in a Seoul conference hallway 18 months ago. But it was theirs, built on 3 days that became 6 months, that became a year of patience and trust and choosing each other every single day across impossible distances. And now, finally, impossibly, beautifully, it was real. No more crescent moon emojis sent from unknown numbers. No more goodbyes at airport security. No more wondering if love could survive logistics and security protocols and all the complicated ways the world tries to keep people apart.
Just two people who chose each other, who fought for each other, who waited for each other, and who finally got to be together. Not perfectly, not without scars from the journey, but real, and together, and home. 18 months after they met, after Amina first walked into that Seoul conference, Minjae asked her to marry him. He proposed on Namsan Tower, the same spot where they'd first kissed, where Seoul had spread out below them like possibility. And Amina, who'd spent years being professional and composed and unshakable, broke down crying and said yes before he even finished asking. Because some love stories take the long way around. They test you and break you and force you to choose them over and over again. But when you finally arrive, when the impossible becomes possible, it's sweeter than any easy love could ever be. Amina and Minjae's story started with what happens when the person you should never love becomes the one your heart chooses. The answer? You fight, you wait, you trust, and you let love be worth the impossibility. Because sometimes, just sometimes, storms turn into sunlight, and the one you should never love becomes the one you can't imagine living without. That's not easy, but it's real. And real is always better than easy. Always.